I've got a mirth moment. Would you like a mirth moment? You want to laugh? Okay, well, these mirth moments have come from members of our exalted congregations. That's my justification in part for sharing them. Here's a great one. A new pastor was visiting in the homes of his parishioners. This is a conventional church, obviously. At one house, it seemed obvious that someone was at home, but no answer came to the repeated knocks on the door. Therefore, the pastor took out a business card and wrote Revelation 3:20 on the back of it and stuck it in the door. When the offering was collected the following Sunday, he eventually found that his card had been returned. Added to it was this cryptic message, Genesis 3:10. Reaching for his Bible to check out the citation, he broke up. Revelation 3:10 begins, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." But Genesis 3:10 reads, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid, for I was naked." Here are some one-liners. Did you ever notice when you put the two words "the" and IRS together, it spells theirs? When you are dissatisfied and would like to go back to youth, think of algebra. Long ago, when men cursed and beat the ground with sticks and danced upon green grass, it was called witchcraft. Today it's called golf. And did you ever notice that the Roman numerals for 40 are XL? How discouraging. Let me read you from Matthew 7:7. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. For everyone who receives, then he has asked, and to him the door will always be open. I don't know whether you picked up this morning in your bulletin this little handout, Personal Credo, because unusually I'm going to ask you, if you care to follow me along with this. I wouldn't normally ask you to read something in the bulletin during the service because it probably would have a devastating effect, at least on what I want to share. But this morning I do want to refer to it, and I want to refer back to those words that I just shared also with you. Today, of course, is Mother's Day, and we celebrate the virtues of motherhood. Even though our own mothers may not have demonstrated them, still we celebrate them on this day. I had a woman come up to me about 4 or 5 years ago in ministry. She was obviously of the radically feminist persuasion, which is fine with me. And she said, "You're not going to talk all that about motherhood this morning, are you?" She said, "What do men know about mothers and motherhood?" And I said, "Well, all right, that's a justifiable question. Men know a teeny-weeny bit about motherhood, especially when they're left alone with baby, but by and large, we don't understand. Men don't understand the psychological tie between a woman and a child, and don't understand many of the emotional and psychological passages through which a mother passes in order to produce and to nurture her offspring. So I've kind of been a little bit nervous, as they say in Jersey, nervous, since that time, I've been very careful about pontificating about motherhood. So this morning, I wanted to share with you something that relates to motherhood, my own mother specifically, and see if that may be of benefit to you and avoid the somewhat egregious mistakes that men often make when they try to discuss women. I'm treading on very, very dangerous ground. I know I'm from Mars and you're from Venus, but there you are. We're both in the solar system after all. So what I want to tell you is this. My mother's been passed some time. She died, in fact, in 1981. But she, as I've said to you before in this place, she was a remarkably spiritually aware woman. She was what I think we would have called a seer in ancient times. She saw not only the possibilities of the future, and she called them possibilities. She said there was always the possibility of change in the future, but she saw the likelihood of future events. And also, she was able to look into her own life and the lives of other people and to discern patterns there and events that might materialize. And she knew exactly when she was going to pass. She told me and Carol, my wife, she told us, because we were living with her at that time, she told us exactly when she was going to pass. She knew exactly. She was not frightened in the least and not alarmed, because she looked forward to embracing that broader view, that greater experience of the life eternal. It didn't disconcert her in the least. But she knew, of course, we lamented and we said, "Oh, no, no, Mom, you got it wrong this time." No, she died almost exactly at the time that she had predicted a year before. But before she went, she asked me, she said, and she had the privilege of calling me Nicky, which is what the Kaiser used to call Tsar Nicholas II, but that's all beside the point. She used to call me Nicky. She said, "Nicky, would you, before I go, would you write down what you believe?" I said, "Oh, don't be silly, Mother, for heaven's sake. Let's get real here." She said, "No, I want to know what you believe." And so I wrote for her a credo. Now, the word credo isn't used very much anymore, except its derivative in the word credibility. We still use that. But credo means essentially in the Latin, I believe, I believe. And in ancient times, in times removed from this, many times individuals were asked to write a credo indicating what they really believed. I mean, you know how it is when somebody comes up to you, not in a bar, I hope, somebody comes up to you and nudges you and says, "What do you really believe? You can tell me. I won't tell anybody." Well, of course they will. That's beside the point. They nudge you and they say, "You can tell me, what do you really believe? All this stuff on Sunday morning, all this stuff in the classroom, I realize you have to spout that, but what do you really believe?" And so she was saying, in a sense, the same thing. What do you really believe? Forcing me to focus and concentrate my mind on what it is that I really did believe, even though at times I might disavow it or dismiss it or trivialize it. What do you really come on. You're not so superficial that you don't believe anything at all. Well, I believe I have to pay my tax every year. But let's be serious. What do we really, really, truly believe? So what I'm going to do this morning is to invite you to respond to my mother's question. What do you really believe? Maybe what has brought you here this morning? Companionship, the food, the coffee, I don't know. But if you really believe something, you may be able to put it down. It's a start, it's a help. Because it was difficult for me. Mr. Fillmore, the founder of our Unity movement, said, "I reserve the right to change my mind every day." I don't know whether this is a good foundation for belief or not, but he certainly had very clear beliefs. I think what he was saying, in effect, was that his beliefs remained fundamentally the same, but his way of expressing them, of transmitting them, of sharing them would change from time to time as his insights changed, and I respect that. But anyway, on one side of this little bit of paper, which you can do anything you like with, this little piece of paper, I have my personal credo, the little credo that I shared with Mother when she asked me. On the other side, there's room for you to build a personal credo of your own. You may say, poof, I don't want, what? I'm not going to look at it. I will never see it. Probably nobody ever will. But why not put down, I believe. What do I believe? You can change it. Of course you can. It's not cast in stone. We've left the days when we inscribed everything on stone tablets, thank goodness. So we can write anything we want. But it's startling sometimes. It's a revelation sometimes. It's extraordinary sometimes. It's even profound to suddenly stop and say, well, wait a minute. What do I believe beyond the inevitability of taxation and death? What do I believe? And it comes as a surprise very often. So this is an invitation, a Mother's Day invitation. But let me run through this very quickly. I believe in a purpose in my existence, I said. That, to me, is the foundational principle. If I don't believe in a purpose for my existence, why would I go on? Why would I go beyond that? If I'm just something random, an amoeba that cropped up somewhere out of probability or possibility, the basic view of science today is that we live in a purposive, not purposeful necessarily, but a purposive universe, one created. We could just as well be living in chaos, but we're living in order and a degree of predictability. That's extraordinary when you begin to realize what the connotation is. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a God. What it does mean is that there's order, harmony, and certainly purpose of some sort or another in the universe in which we live and in ourselves, because we ourselves are part of that same universe. We're not excluded. We don't stand outside. We're not mute watchers of what takes place. We're not inanimate. We are part of the living whole. So if indeed there is a purpose to it, we must ourselves share that purpose in some means or other. But to wake up in the morning and say there's a purpose in or for my existence is a considerable accomplishment, quite frankly. There are a lot of people who get up in the morning, and I don't blame them, frankly, seeing the circumstances in which they may find themselves. There are a lot of people who must wake up in the morning, and indeed do wake up in the morning and say, if they even ask the question, there is no purpose in or for my existence. This is a big step. You say, no, there's a purpose. There's a purpose for my existence. And then I say, I believe that purpose has to do with soul growth. What is that? What is that? I become a little more metaphysical as I move forward, perhaps a little more opaque. What does it mean to have soul growth? What is a soul? Have you ever seen a soul? The Greeks thought it lodged in the head, in the cranium, and at death exited through the occipital opening here at the back. It's the only way they could account for that little hole at the back of our skulls. Descartes, Cartesius, the great 17th century French philosopher, and there were great French philosophers in those days, he said, no, it's located in the pineal gland. That's where he placed the soul. What is the soul? I don't know. I have the faintest idea. But I believe it to be, if anything, the collective experience of the human creature. Something that is ineradicably us. Something that is us, that distinguishes us from the vast mass of pullulating humanity. It makes us, in some sense, individual. That, to me, is the soul consciousness. And I believe that my purpose here has to do with that soul consciousness. Think about it. Think about it. Maybe you'll reject it. I believe that God is one and that God is intelligent. What is God? I'm not going to tell you what God is because I'm not stupid enough to suggest. I don't think he's an old man with a white beard. Unity, if it were asked to define its belief in God, would probably come closest to what in the 18th century was called deism, the notion that God created the world. But we go beyond that. We might even be called pantheists, which means God everywhere present. How do you retain the intelligence if it's evenly distributed throughout the universe? The moral quotient that people ascribe to God. These are theological questions. I might address them if we have another forum. But I believe God is one. And that one is intelligent. That follows from the notion that this universe has order and purpose, that it's been constructed, as it were, with that in view. I say life and the eternal cosmos. I don't know why I inducted such a pompous phrase at that point, probably to impress Mother. I say, I believe I am that expression of that one. An expression. That's what unity says. We say we are, in fact, expressions of the one, manifestations of the one. That's an astounding assertion when you think of it. And that leads to the notion that God needs us through which to express. It suggests that we are a necessary part of creation, not something sort of over here, some aberration, a planet that went wrong, that when God goes by, oh my God, not that bunch. This actually suggests God needs us through which to express. To express what? To express whatever God may be, which, if you look at it, could be construed as life itself. Life. And you can use a synonym for that by saying love. We express hope, joy, fulfillment, love, compassion through ourselves. And in that way, God enters the world in a more tangible sense. In a more tangible sense than the instinct of the butterfly that takes it from Canada to Mexico. That's instinctual behavior. We have a capacity to indulge in self-reflective behavior. But God needs me, I said, through which to express. I believe in eternal life, the life before birth, because often we don't even think about that. Life before birth and life after so-called death. I believe we must affirm these beliefs as often as possible. Okay, that's a conventional utterance. I say I believe I must live a simple life. What does a simple life mean? Somebody came up to me once and said, I am looking for spiritual awareness. What must I do? I said, the more you simplify your life, the more likely you are to enjoy a spiritual awareness. And he said, well, why isn't there the verb complexify instead? I'm not sure, but I invented it on the spot. I complexify, you complexify, we shall complexify, we have complexified, we will complexify. You can run through all the moods of a verb on that one. And English is wonderful for inventing verbs. That's why non-English speakers adore English, because you can quickly invent a verb anytime you want, and you got it made. So I said I believe I must live a simple life, so that the pursuits of the material world, there's nothing wrong with them, we're in the material world after all, but from which I must learn, don't cause me to forget my divine identity. Think about that one. I believe I came into this world in this expression of the one with a soul consciousness, and I believe that this soul consciousness will be all that I take with me when I leave. What else are you going to take with you? What else are you going to take with you? I told you the story once, I think, of the man who bought a big Cadillac, and he was very attached to it, and he was buried sitting in the darn thing. This was back in 1916. A few years ago, his descendants, his descending relatives, got a court order to enable them to open the vault and remove the Cadillac. They weren't interested in him. They wanted to remove the Cadillac, because in all those years, the Cadillac had become extremely valuable. He hadn't, but the Cadillac had. So, who had who had the divine identity? The Cadillac or the occupant? I don't know. You must decide that for yourselves. I've nothing against the material world. We live in the material world. We have to accumulate material possessions in order to survive. But if that causes us to forget our divine identity, which is immaterial and eternal, in my understanding, then we become submerged in that materiality, and we suffer frustration and sadness, I think, as a result. You may say, have you ever met a rich man or woman who is happy? Frankly, not. The same frustrations and irritations are experienced by them as by me, so I don't know. I have said, Lord, let my soul have grown here on earth in company with others on the path toward the light of your being. So this is all me. And this was me 30 years ago. And I might have changed my view on some of these headings. But what I'm suggesting is today that in honor of the notion, the concept of motherhood, let's not go into the details. The concept of, what is the concept of motherhood? A nurturing, accepting, compassionate presence. In the spirit of honoring that, let's look at our own beliefs and how they might fit in to that overall realization. And that's why on the back of this little piece of paper, I put your personal credo. I don't want to see it. I never want to know. And if I were you, I would keep this. The Pope says, in petto, in the breast. I would keep this confidential if I were you, and make it just your own, and reserve the right to change it any time you want. But this focusing, teeny-weeny focusing document can do more to bring us into spiritual self-realization than all the books and the tapes and the CDs and the gurus and the lectures that we ever hear. Because truthfully, as our scripture said, knock and the door shall be opened. We take the initiative. We reach out, and it comes to us, that truth in our hearts, and we put it down, and it becomes an actuality that we can live by, recognize, understand, and deeply perhaps appreciate as we move forward along this path of spiritual awareness that all of us are on. Now I'll sit down and shut up.